if we don't have to design housing so that people can, have to age out of them, people will stay in their own homes for longer, which is what we want and what we need.
Welcome back to Closer Look across the Village Media Network and wherever you get your favorite podcast. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief, is here. You a burger guy?
I like burgers, yeah.
Got a fave? Got a favorite?
Like from fast food?
Yeah.
I don't think I eat enough fast. Believe it or not, I don't eat enough fast food.
Hello, pot. This is the kettle.
Yeah. If you buy me a Big Mac, I'll eat it.
Really?
Yeah.
Big Mac?
Sure. Well, why not?
McDonald's, funny you should mention that. Getting ripped on social right now over Chris Kaczynski, the Chris K, as he goes by, the head honcho, the top fry, the big dog at the Golden Arches over the Big Arch.
It has been funny to watch it just because of all the not so good things happening in the world. It's nice to have a bit of a distraction.
And the best part is all of his competitors are just ripping into this guy.
So long story short, he puts out a social media video about trying their, what is it?
The Big Arch.
The Big Arch burger, and he makes a big production about it and takes like the smallest possible bite. And then everyone's kind of made fun of him, the guy from A&W, the iconic guy, Burger King, Wendy's. I do get it. There's been a good tradition now of companies kind of poking fun at each other on social media, when they do that, which I think is great.
And I will say this: I don't know who does Wendy's social media, but if you get a chance, follow them. They are iconic.
Yeah, there was a good one. Oh. What happened when remember the Colonel Sanders guy was at the Blue Jays game, and Wendy's had a good comeback to that one.
You're right, and I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't the first. Whoever does Wendy's social.
I think it was because the Jays lost that game, and so they all started making fun of that he's the curse, the Colonel Curse or something.
Yeah,
like that. So
it could have been that.
It was pretty funny, actually. It was pretty funny.
All right. Big Arch, not on the dinner menu tonight for either one of us.
No, I'm good.
What's on the menu tonight, show-wise, is we're talking about in the next 15 years, and these numbers are staggering. Population of the province of Ontario, 14 million, 15 million?
It's around there, yeah.
In the next 15 years, the number of Ontarians of the age of 80 or older will be 1.5 million.
1.5 million.
And a lot of advocate groups or advocacy groups are saying, you know what, we're not ready for this. The province isn't ready. The province hasn't done enough or anything, and they need to get their act together.
Yeah, and it's considered a mega trend, as is the right word. And the United Nations and the World Health Organization have talked about how this is something we're not paying enough attention to. The other stat that's crazy is the number of people in Ontario age 65 or older will grow from 2.6 million in 2020 to 4.2 million in 2040. So it's a lot of elderly people in Ontario. Yeah. And so other jurisdictions like California, New York, some other OECD countries have really made this a priority to kind of look at everything through the lens of aging. Yeah. And there's a growing push in Ontario for the Ontario government to do the same thing, to be focused, maybe even have a Ministry of Longevity is one thing I've heard, Ministry of Aging, not just in healthcare, but in housing, in affordability, all these different issues that affect it's just about acknowledging the fact that we're going to have a much older population over the next couple decades, and we need to do more about it. So who are we going to talk to today?
We are going to talk to Laura Tamblin-Watts. Laura is the CEO of CanAge. Ontario is about to get a lot older and fast. Within 15 years, more than 1.5 million Ontarians will be over the age of 80, part of what experts call a global megatrend on the scale of artificial intelligence or climate change. But while other jurisdictions are building comprehensive plans to prepare for longer lives, advocates say Ontario is still dealing with aging in silos, reacting to crisis instead of planning for longevity. Laura Tamblin-Watts is the CEO of CanAge, a national advocacy organization, and she's joining us tonight from beautiful Whistler, BC. Laura, welcome to Closer Look. We appreciate your time.
Great to be here.
Okay, Laura, we'll get into aging and this mega trend as it's been referred to. But let's start with your organization, CanAge. Tell us about it and the work that you and your team are doing.
We want to make sure that Canada is the best possible place to age for all Canadians. Certainly, we all know about the demographic shifts. And in fact, this year, we became a super aging country with 1 out of every 5 people over the age of 65. So our organization works to support all kinds of initiatives at the local, the national, and even the international level to try to make sure that we have what we need in order to make sure that we age safely and well.
All right, good stuff. Appreciate that description. Okay, let's get to the aging population. And we mentioned it off the top. Within 15 years, there will be more than 1.5 million Ontarians over the age of 80. When you look at Ontario right now, Laura, what's the biggest blind spot in how we're preparing for that older population?
The biggest blind spot is that we're not preparing for it at all. What we do well in Ontario is crisis funding. And I think it has to be said that the Ford government has done a lot in little areas. They've done a lot of investment in long-term care. There's no question about it. But you can build a lot of beds at, by the way, $1 million a bed right now for a new build.
Wow.
But we don't have enough people to staff them. And it's not necessarily places that people want to be anyway. So what we don't have is a strategy for longevity. We need a ministry of longevity. It's actually a good news story. It's bad news if we're not planning and we're just putting money here and there and trying to put out crisis fires. It's not the way forward.
And I think what you're saying, too, is we have to think way beyond long-term care. That can't be the only thing.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to be over 80, so I'm going to go live in a long-term care home, right?
Exactly. And that's actually not what people either want or generally what they need. In fact, very few of us will ever end up in long-term care. When we think about what we need for that ministry of longevity or our aging strategy, we need somebody who's empowered to look across the different ministries and say, okay, transportation, how are we building our systems to make sure that they're accessible and they get people to where they need to be? Okay, we're going to look at municipalities and parks. How do we make sure that people can get out and about, that they don't become lonely and isolated, that there are enough accessible ways to enjoy different parks? We can put bathrooms places and benches. I mean, some of them are really easy. And then at the more structural level, how are we thinking about our health and housing? Do you know, we have about one pediatrician for every 2,000 kids 17 and under, about 1 for 2,000. Do you know, in Canada, we have 1 geriatrician for every 21,000 seniors.
Wow,
and we have far more older people than we do have kids. And those numbers are representative in Ontario as well. So we need to be doing some thinking about where we're investing and encouraging things in our healthcare system, our housing system, and our broader social system.
Laura, I know places like California and New York have implemented master plans for aging. What have they done that Ontario could realistically adopt?
The good news is actually there's terrific things that they could have done that we could adopt. And it's not just the 22 U.S. states that have done it, but actually every other jurisdiction in the OECD. You know, Canada is the only country in the OECD that does not have an aging strategy. And Ontario, in many ways, is a little country, right? It actually has such a profound population and GDP that it's fair to think of Ontario as its own jurisdiction like California or New York. So what they've done is they've got a person that really is charged to make sure that every single spend and every single strategic plan that's coming out of the government across all of the ministries is building out how aging and longevity is being thought through and where their money and their initiatives are focused. So that doesn't mean don't put money into hospitals. Of course we do. But what we need to do is shift so much of our crisis health funding to things like vaccinations, to things like preventive health, home care. We know that these are the cheapest and most effective things that we can do. And so each of New York and California and all of the other OECD countries and those 22 states have got this. And it doesn't just stretch in health, as we say. It's about things like building supplies. How are we thinking about building not just new communities, but new residences? Are we using inclusive design? Are we changing those standards? If we don't have to design housing so that people can have to age out of them, people will stay in their own homes for longer, which is what we want and what we need.
For sure. It's what so many of the people want. We've heard that over and over in different research, different surveys. Just back to the number you threw out there, 21,000 patients per one doctor who specializes in health. That's if they'd have to see 57 patients a day, 365 days a year. I just took out my trusty. That's bonkers.
It's crazy.
But my question, Laura, is why isn't Canada with everyone else on this? Why are we so far behind?
Now, this is a question I get up with and wrestle in the morning. I think we all do as well. I think it comes from a good sense of Canadianism. And I say this with generosity of spirit. We're really proud of our healthcare system, rightly so. We're proud of our social systems. We take care of each other, rightly so. But what we're not always good at is planning. And I think that this federal government, and for that matter, this provincial government, is really having to confront. It takes a long time to make one geriatrician. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about that 12 years before. It takes a long time to change building codes. Well, it doesn't have to, but it does seem to take a long time to building codes to change. And so these are things that take preparatory action. And we usually think about how are we going to get elected, right? Almost immediately. When's the next election? How are we thinking about our election cycle? But when you think about where affordability and what people want intersect, it's around these types of investments. Mm-hmm. So we need to simply make sure that we're encouraging the labor force, frankly, to stay and work longer because we're going to be in a major labor crisis. So we have to make sure that people can afford to do that and that businesses have flexibility. We need people to stay in their houses longer. So we need to make houses much more accessible and bring home care into those houses. Why we haven't done it? I think we just figured we would do it in strong Canadian spirit. We just sort of figure it out. Mm-hmm. And it's not what's working.
Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. I'm fascinated by this issue of staying in your house because that's the key. We hear from so many different people that want to stay at home. And you talk about making your homes more accessible or making sure there is housing that people can transition into. So it's not from the house they maybe raise their kids in to the long-term care home. There's got to be something else. Where is that working? Who's doing that? Is there any community in Canada that's doing a good job of that?
Well, actually, there are really great examples. I'm here in British Columbia today, and British Columbia has been innovative, although this last budget wouldn't suggest that. But previously, BC's been very innovative. It's got a seniors advocate who is really that conscience of the government, arm's length, but part of the government that is putting out reports, that is reviewing what's important, that is actually holding government to account. It's been very effective, and they've had that for more than a decade. We're also seeing that British Columbia has some mortgage backing. So BC Housing will actually help to support and fund some of the development of innovative housing or even health models. Things like dementia villages are out here and just starting in Ontario. So we're really seeing some jurisdictions pay attention to it.
Dementia villages. I've never heard that term. That's a thing.
It's wonderful, actually. So if we think about how people need to age in a supportive and inclusive environment and what we don't want, you don't want the old nursing home warehousing model. We've all got that horrid in our head. It doesn't need to be like that. We have communities that are called a campus of care. And in the sort of first set of buildings, for instance, there's just independent housing, like your mom might want to live in. Maybe there's some great activities there, some really interesting opportunities to live a really vital and an independent life. And when they need help, some home care can come in. And then you move to perhaps the next building over or just more care layers in, ideally, and you get that assisted living, that retirement home type of supports. If you need that 24/7 nursing care, again, it's on that same place. Maybe it's a slightly different building, but it looks the same. The people are dressed as regular people. They're not in these medical costumes that we always worry about. And part of that can be what's called a dementia village, where really everybody there has got significant cognitive impairment, and it looks like a small town. There's a grocery store, there's a barber shop, there are all the different things that you find on Main Street, and it's all people who have specialized training. And so people go to work, if you will, they go shopping, if you will, they eat, they make their food. And what we know is that this reduces those aggressive behaviors. It makes people who have significant cognitive impairment feel really part of a great community, and staff like to work there. And that is a big piece, because so often when we design systems badly, we can't keep staff in one place. And that's something Ontario has. About 18 months is the average amount of time someone will work in seniors care. And unless we change that to some of these new models, we're going to see that churn through. That doesn't help us at all.
That's a great point. It's fascinating. We always talk about how we learn something new every day on this show. That's what I learned today. So thank you for that. We talk a lot too about whatever the issue is, whether it's the opioid crisis, for example, or mental health issues in this country. We always talk about the goal of trying to keep people out of emergency rooms. We need to think outside of that, right? Can you speak to that in this case, Laura? That's really the key here, is to figure out how to not be in the point of crisis all the time.
There's a few things that you can do, and this is the really recipe for success on this one. Number one, get every vaccination you possibly can. And I mean, I know people get tired of hearing COVID-19 and so on and so forth, but did you know that the shingles vaccine, is actually about 24% protective for dementia? Also, you don't get shingles, right? And so when we're thinking about it, imagine if you had a vaccine for dementia. I mean, everybody would take it. And that's also one of the biggest things that we need to think about our aging population. And yet, we know across this country, getting shingles vaccine can be a real challenge. We fought really hard in Ontario, and we have it covered. In fact, many of the vaccines Ontario does cover, which has been the source of great initiatives for people. But get vaccinated. Number two, do not fall. And boy, I was in Toronto just yesterday, and it was minus 18, and everyone was slipping and falling. Do not fall. The average amount of time a person who falls and breaks a hip, if they're over the age of 80, will live, it's about, well, you got about 50% chance of living 1 year. And then if you manage to make past 1 year, your chances of, living in the next year goes down again by about 75%. So your chances of dying is very, very high. And if you manage not to die, your chances of ever walking again in a really normal, able way is significantly reduced. So do not fall, right? Number three, stay socially connected. And it is so important. We think about things like, well, how does that social connection, how does that connect with an emergency room? It absolutely does. The less socially connected you are, the less opportunity you have. You use your brain to use your body to feel good. It's not just a mental health issue. If a person is lonely, it takes up to about 8 years off of their life and increases your chances of dementia by almost 40%. So staying socially connected is really a health issue. If you can manage to do those three things, you're going to be ahead of the game, and you're probably not going to be in the ER.
Wow, that's great advice. I mean, you've fired up all the anti-vaxxers, Laura, but that's another episode.
Listen, I mean, absolutely. And, it's so interesting that this is even a political issue, because it is the number one best thing that you can do for yourself, for your community, for your office, and for the country, and for the health and social care system. Remember lining up for your COVID vaccine? I drove to a different part of Ontario to get mine, but now people are feeling hesitant, and that's just got to go away. The number one best thing you can do for your own health is to get vaccinated against every possible thing.
All right, good stuff. What are some other upstream solutions, Laura?
We know that housing is a huge issue for people. There's no question about that. And the idea of the big family house, it's okay. Many people think, well, why don't you just move out of that and use that money to live somewhere else? You'll have more money, because outliving your money is a real thing. It is actually not just a fear, it's a reality. The challenge is there's almost nowhere to move to. And they got to take a minute to think about that. That's especially true in rural areas. A lot of Ontario is rural, a lot of Canada is rural. In fact, about 65% of people who live in rural communities are seniors. And so if you sell the big family house, which you've probably paid off, and it probably has lots of stairs, and it, maybe have transportation issues and so on and so forth, there's nowhere to move to, because the new building codes are not inclusive. And in fact, the costs of living in your own home, you can often defer property taxes. You can usually use some of the different tax benefits to be there. And the cost of moving itself is really prohibitive and really disorienting. So thinking about different ways of intergenerational housing, that's really coming back. Granny flats, although I use the name or don't use the name, those types of laneway housing, or breaking into other types of intergenerational co-opting housing. The Golden Girls model is really, really taking off, where you buy a piece or take one person's house and you break it into different places and share some common services. Often folks will bring in some healthcare, some community care, a chef to help you. And so these types of housing with supports, thinking about what makes sense financially and physically, Well, we always say that health and wealth are only one letter apart, and that is a really good way of thinking about it.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, Laura, let's say that you've gotten the Premier's ear, and he says, okay, let's do this. Let's put a plan together. What's the first step, and what would you tell him the first year should look like?
You need to give that person some power and some budget. What we have, of course, is a minister for seniors. And good people have been in that role. I'm not criticizing that, but they're often token ministries with no power, or just they're a nice place to go and you give a handshake and you talk to senior centers. And that's important to some degree, but it doesn't have any power. And what it can often do is shunt off these issues into, well, that's a seniors ministry question. No, longevity is everybody's question, and in fact should be the core of your business model. Premier Ford always talks about running the province like a business. All right, let's see your strategic plan for your business. Who are your customers now and who are your customers going to be in 5 and 10 years? And let's see that build out. So what I would like to see is a robust strategy, but having every single ministry have to allocate some part of its budget to the longevity piece of it, and to make sure that when they're making a decision, let's see that they're going to build some housing in Barrie, or they're going to make investment in transportation up in North Bay. How is that affecting the aging population now and in the future? And again, we've got great models in other jurisdictions. We could just change them a little bit and make them Ontarian. And I tell you, the money that we're spending in crisis is burning hot and fast. What we need to do is, like a good business, strategize where those investments are actually needed and then follow through with those. More geriatricians, fewer pediatricians.
Are people listening to you, Laura? Have anyone in the Ontario government, for example, reached out to you or have a conversation with you?
Absolutely. This is not a new suggestion, and it's not only our organization, CanAge, but actually this is one of those areas where really all organizations agree. In fact, if you look at the most recent budget submissions from even the long-term care associations, Advantage Ontario and OLTCA, home care associations, community-based organizations, dementia organizations like the Alzheimer's, we're all calling for the same thing. The question will be, do they have the courage to confront the fact that they haven't done anything yet? It's okay. The time to start was always 5 years ago or yesterday, but now is just as good in many cases, because we are not getting any younger. That's the good news. But we're not getting any smarter would be the bad news.
Yeah, that makes sense. Last question from me, Laura. You did touch on, you've given a lot of good advice in this conversation, but we have listeners for sure who are in their 70s right now, even in their 80s, listening to this show and thinking about a lot of the questions we're talking about. What's your biggest piece of advice for them?
Take it seriously and plan ahead. I actually wrote a book called Let's Talk About Aging Parents. And one of the best parts about it is that it's not just people in their middle years that are buying the book. It's a handbook really about the 27 different things that you need to talk about and plan for, and walk you all the way through it as a guidebook. What I've loved is that people in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s are buying it and handing it out to their kids and their grandkids and saying, here, I've put some tape flags on certain things. Don't forget that your own personal planning is critically important, right? That we can't just assume the government is going to do everything. And in this case, just by numbers, the government's going to be able to do less and less. So don't assume that these things are all going to be paid for. They're not. Presume you're going to live much longer than you think you're going to live. That's the good news. And actually make sure that you're keeping your money for the times that you need it, which tends to be the last 2 years of your life. Get your powers of attorney done and get your will done. It matters a lot. And those things you can do for free. I prefer you get some legal advice. That's the lawyer in me. But regardless, it's critically important that you take care of your own decisions and not just let everything happen to you.
Good stuff. Laura, before we let you go, anything that we didn't cover on this issue that you want to bring up?
It's good news. This is actually a good news story, not a bad news story. We are living better, and we know how to do it in other jurisdictions. We've got a great roadmap, and frankly, everybody agrees what needs to happen. So the best thing to do is to lend your voice as we're moving into this budget by saying, how are we thinking about aging and longevity?
All right, good stuff. There's Laura Tamplin-Watts, the Chief Executive Officer at CanAge. Laura, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your point, and it was a good one, as usual.
Thank you.
That we,
I don't know what you're talking about.
That we walk out of here learning something. Dementia Village.
Yes. That's crazy.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. But it's funny because we had a guest on a couple of weeks ago from another aging organization, right?
Yes.
Talking about similar issues, about transitioning to the next phase, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily dementia village, but having a place to go, right? Something that's different than that bigger home you may have raised your kids in, somewhere to go. But I've never heard of dementia village, so that is a pretty fascinating thing. This idea that, and it's also set up in a way that, you know, there's a grocery store, and like you feel like you're still living your normal life, and you know, it's a theme that keeps coming back, and I mentioned it as well. Everything seems to be coming back to guests saying, the key is we want to avoid the crisis. We don't want these people at our emergency rooms, whether it be people struggling with mental health, people struggling with addictions, people struggling with dementia.
Yeah,
we don't want them in our emergency rooms because that just clogs the system in every way. We want to have better options for these people. Yeah. And it's amazing how often that is the case, right? So the goal of trying to find the balance is to keep emergency rooms and hospitals for emergencies and hospital procedures. That's the key, right? And I think that's the challenge on so many fronts. It's interesting that it's the same thing here.
Yeah. Minister of Longevity.
Yes.
Like that. It's a good handle.
Don't give me that job. I wouldn't last very long.
You would not be the Minister of Longevity.
No.
All right. Good stuff. Zach Trunzo on the cameras and switching tonight. Derek Turner doing his usual mastery and post-production for Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Closer look at villagemedia.ca. Reach out. We'd love to hear thoughts from you. We'll see you tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.